Here we are one more time, my brothers and sisters, for another Living Hope Today study. Thank you again for coming to study God's Word with me. It's a great privilege for us to spend this time together to learn His Word. And today we find ourselves in Deuteronomy chapter 15. Now, this is a very interesting chapter in the sense of it deals with money. It deals with lending and debt. You know, a lot of us think about our money as our money. We're owners of what we have. Well, God looks at this and says, no, you're a steward. Do with your money what honors me. We're going to see that today, and we're going to see how it leads to the blessing of God if we pay attention to what He wants us to do with the resources that He's given us. As the chapter begins, it specifically starts speaking about debt. Listen to this, you bankers. This would have to freak out most of the financial world right here. At the end of every 7 years, you must cancel debts. Wow, you mean the 30-year mortgage is over right here? We're not doing that anymore? At the end of every 7 years, you must cancel debts. Wow. So if you're the lender, you're no longer going to be the lender because you're going to say you don't owe me anything anymore. Who wants to do that with their money? And yet look at how God looks at this. This is how it is to be done. Every creditor, that's the lender, shall cancel the loan he has made to his fellow Israelite. Hey, you owe me $5,000? Well, now you don't, because it's the 7th year. Wow. He shall not require payment from his fellow Israelite or brother. Wow. So because you're in the community of God's chosen people, I am not going to charge you what you owe me. The debt's still real, but the lender now forgives the debt because the Lord's time for canceling debts has been proclaimed. So God says, look, you might think your money belongs to you. You might think you get to do whatever you want and you earned it through your own strength. You remember, don't you, in Deuteronomy 8, where God said, look, you didn't earn this because of your own strength. You earned it because I gave you the strength to earn it. Remember that? Well, here we are. God says, cancel the debt. Cancel it. You don't owe me anymore. You may require payment from a foreigner. Okay, so if you're not in the Israelite community, all right, then we're going to hold you to your debt. You're going to pay. But if you are part of the 12 tribes, the descendants of Abraham, you are going to get your debt canceled. And if you're the lender, your loan is going to be canceled. Okay, you may require payment from a foreigner, but you must cancel any debt your brother owes you. Why, God? Why are you so interested in this? However, there should be no poor among you. Okay, so the haves and the have-nots, that's not to be a dynamic in God's community. All right, for in the land the Lord your God is giving you to possess as your inheritance, what's He going to do if we follow these things? He will richly bless you. He's going to bless you. There are not going to be poor people in God's community. If only you fully obey the Lord your God and are careful to follow all these commands I am giving you today. Follow this. What happens if you follow this? Well, for the Lord your God will bless you, as He has promised, and you will lend to many nations, but borrow from none. Notice what happens here. It's not that we're not still going to be lenders, just not to the chosen people, the descendants of Abraham. We can lend for a time, but guess what? At the end of 7 years, the debt is canceled, or every 7th year, the debt is canceled. If we lend to a foreigner, if we lend to a foreign nation, we're going to be able to collect that debt. But God says this principle here in verse 6, you're going to lend to many nations, but you're not going to borrow from any. You'll borrow from none. In other words, you're not going to be in debt to other people groups, all right? You will rule over many nations, but none will rule over you. This is what God is saying will happen. This is what the blessing will be if they follow these instructions. If there is a poor man among your brothers in any of the towns of the land that the Lord your God is giving you, don't be hard-hearted or tight-fisted toward your poor brother. Rather, be open-handed and freely lend him whatever he needs. Wow. Okay, so there's somebody that just isn't doing well in life for whatever reason. Don't hold on to your stuff. Look at that person. Now, again, this is confined to the community of God's chosen people in Deuteronomy 15. If it's a foreigner, go ahead, collect your debt. But if it's one of the group that's a descendant of Abraham, that's from a tribe of Israel, lend freely to that person. Help him with whatever he needs. The attitude of the open hand. I'm not going to hold on to my stuff. I'm not an owner of all my stuff because it's not my stuff. Everything I have received from God. I am a steward of everything God has provided. I give as he instructs. And here we see in Deuteronomy 15, he's instructing quite a bit. Be careful not to harbor this wicked thought. Okay, now he's going to dive into our motives and challenge us. The 7th year, the year for canceling debts, is near, so that you do not show ill will toward your needy brother and give him nothing. Hey, guess what? Next year I'm going to have to forgive this debt, so I'm not going to lend you anything now. God says, don't think like that. Don't let that wicked thought get in your head. All right? He may then appeal to the Lord against you, and you'll be found guilty of sin. In other words, we lend to that fellow Israelite no matter how soon the year of cancellation is coming. We open our hands and give as God has instructed. Give generously to him. Wow. And do so without a grudging heart. I don't want the motive of, I hate that I have to do this, but God told me I had to, so I'm going to. No. God says, I want your heart to be right while you do it. God's given me everything I have. God's instructed me to help this needy brother who's in the community of the Israelites. And so, with a glad heart, with a grateful heart, I'm going to give generously to him. That's the attitude God's after. Because of this, the Lord your God he's going to do what? He will bless you in all your work and in everything you put your hand to. In other words, you can't outgive God. You give and you think, oh man, that's going to hurt me because I'm not going to have whatever it was that you gave. But God says, wait a minute, I'm going to replenish you. I'm going to bless you in everything you do. If you collected 100 bushels this harvest, you're going to collect 150 next harvest, or whatever those numbers might be. But God is saying, I'm watching. Obey me in these things, and you will experience how easily I replenish whatever it is that you offer. There will always be poor people in the land, and therefore I command you what? Be open-handed toward your brothers and toward the poor and needy in your land. Wow. So, we look at the Bible and we say, gee, in the Old Testament, there's really no Social Security system like we would recognize it today in modern America, right? Where if you have enough trouble, what do? You go to the government and they put you on the roll and they pay to feed you, and the taxpayers bear the burden of your poverty, and okay, off you go to live your life without having to pay your things. Well, God says, no, we're not doing Social Security. The government's not in charge of this. The individuals are in charge of this. We're not depending on the nation of Israel for this. We're depending on each and every person who sees the poverty in front of them from their brother. They now have the obligation, knowing of the need, to supply the need. If a fellow Hebrew, again, look at how this gets qualified. If a fellow Hebrew, a man or a woman, no gender distinction, sells himself to you and serves you 6 years. In other words, sometimes the debt would be overriding somebody. It was overwhelming to them. They couldn't pay it back. So what did they do? They went to a person that was prospering, most likely a farmer who had huge amounts of crops, and they said, look, I owe all this money. I'm going to sell myself to you. I'm going to work for you, and I'll belong to you. I'll be your slave, so to speak. This was their welfare system. I'll be your servant in this to do whatever you call me to do in the keeping of your property so that you prosper, and I am also fed and sheltered and protected in the midst of it. Okay, God says, look, you can do that, and you can keep them for 6 years if they're in that kind of trouble. But in the 7th year, you have to look at that person and say, okay, you've paid your debt to me. You don't have to work for me anymore. You're free. Go ahead, go live your life. In fact, when you release him, don't send him away empty-handed. In other words, in that 7th year, when you set him free, you supply him liberally from your flock, your threshing floor, and your winepress. Give to him as the Lord your God has blessed you. Think about this. We've been bountifully supplied through the hand of God, so we're going to bountifully supply you so that you can get on your feet. You can walk into life and support yourself. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you. That is why I give you this command today. But if your servant says to you, I don't want to leave you, because he loves you and your family and is well off with you. In other words, the relationship is thriving. Then take an awl. You know what an awl is, I hope. It's a sharp, pointy thing that used to pound like a pinhole in a piece of wood to show you where to drill or something like that. It's almost like a nail, except with a bigger head on it. Take one of those things and push it through his earlobe into the door. So bam, onto the doorpost you go. Well, he will become your servant for life. So in that symbolic action, that person is now bound to your household to serve for life, that you will continue this relationship ongoingly for the future. The next 7-year release date will not apply to you because this desire of the servant has been met. And do the same for your maidservant. Again, no gender distinction here. Do not consider it a hardship to set your servant free. Okay, he doesn't want to stay with you forever, and he's going to leave. Okay, because his service to you these 6 years has been worth twice as much as that of a hired hand. And the Lord, your God, is going to do what? He's going to bless you in everything you do. That tells you that God's watching how we handle our resources, and if we handle them in obedience, God's willing to open up his storehouse to resupply. He's going to bless us in everything we do. In other words, do with our resources what God calls us to do with our resources, and God will say, here, let me turn on the faucet. Let me give you more. Because I can trust you with it. You're going to obey me with it. I'm going to give you more. This is the attitude of God. See, so it's so tempting for us to look at our stuff and say, this is mine. I'm not going to give it. I worked hard for it. Especially people that come from poor backgrounds that are used to scraping by. They get a little bit, they want to hold on to it. I'm not giving you anything. I worked hard for this and I might not be able to get more. God says to us, open your hand. Open your hand. Because once my blessing is placed on your life, I'm going to bless you in everything you do. Why? Because you obeyed me. There it is. Set apart for the Lord your firstborn. Set apart for the Lord your God every firstborn male of your herds and flocks. Now remember, the firstborn belongs to God. Do not put the firstborn of your oxen to work, and do not shear the firstborn of your sheep. Each year you and your family are to eat them in the presence of the Lord your God, at the place he will choose. So one of the things about the firstborn of the flocks is that God reserves the right to have them consumed in his presence as a way to acknowledge his bounty, acknowledge his provision, and praise him. If an animal has a defect, is lame or blind, or has any serious flaw, you must not sacrifice it to the Lord your God. We give our best to God. We don't give our leftovers. You are to eat it in your own towns. Both the ceremonially unclean and the clean may eat it, as if it were gazelle or deer, but you must not eat the blood. Pour it out on the ground like water. Again, we see this repeated over and over again. So chapter 15 is super interesting. Open your hands. Give as God instructs, and watch the blessings of God pour into your life. How does that apply to us today? Well, we're living sacrifices. The New Testament says we should give according to what's in our heart to give. So we go before the Lord and we say, God, these are the things you've given me. How do you want me to use them? I'm a steward of these things. I'm not an owner of these things. These things belong to you, and you've put me in charge of them. Show me how to use them for your glory. It's a really hard lesson for a lot of us because money means so much to us, and we have a temptation to be greedy. Well, I pray that this chapter 15, helps us understand that God isn't thinking like that. He's telling us, keep your hand open. Don't be an owner, be a steward, and I'll bless you. God bless you, church. Serve him well today.
Who is it who for sinners shed his blood, and now for cleansing all can plunge beneath that flood? It's Jesus.